We are live now. All right. I just miscalculated how long the click and the recording will actually take. So, how are you today?
I'm feeling pretty good, thanks. Another day in
Good.
lockdown in Sydney.
Another day in
Um,
lockdown in Sydney.
I actually had a appointment initially to get my citizenship, and they canceled. Well, they canceled not the appointment to sit, but effectively an opportunity to take the test to become a citizen, and they now postponed it indefinitely until we get out of this. So I'm still waiting for that. That's what I was thinking about today. What about
That
you?
you never become a citizen?
If it continues like this, I might be voting United Australia.
I see. I see. Well, are they the party that wants to kick you out or the one that wants to keep you in?
Exactly. I need someone to give me a ticket out of here.
I know nothing about Australian politics. Um, Yeah, my day's been all right. Not much happened, honestly. As you said, lockdown, not the most exciting things. Um, I was I was just giving a reference to an interview for another person, and then everything was otherwise okay.
Good.
So just to start off today, here's a, a question. If I had, I guess it's more like a joke than a question. If I had $1 for every time I had an existential crisis, would it really matter?
It's kind
Are
of dark.
you familiar with the existential philosophers or the existentialism movement?
I might have read a little bit about it. I tried to read Sartre when I was in France for a while. I tried to read it in French. And I think
Hmm.
I remember Closed Doors or something is the name of one of those books. I don't remember anything of it, and it was not the best period of my life, early 20s. Also, I don't think Sartre is just the only writer, right? So there are a lot. Existentialism probably means a lot of things, and there
Oh
are
yeah,
many flavors of it. So that's my only experience with it, and it borders the absurd to a large extent in my mind.
I guess.
What do you mean by existentialism?
Well, today's topic is Albert Camus, who is considered to be an existential philosopher and writer. I didn't have that impression of him when I read him, but reading a bit about him a little bit more, I that's what I came across.
Hmm.
And I think in many ways his life is more interesting than his writing, because what I read about him is that he was by and large a playboy, by and large very handsome, very popular among the ladies, again a playboy, just generally very successful.
Like,
So what would you think the guy like him would write about?
let me see. So it turns people on, makes a lot of money, um,
Very successful.
very successful. Personal development.
He writes about how life is meaningless. He hates everything. Death is the only option. Suicide, that sort of stuff. So it's all very,
Is he
very
actually? That's
depressing.
very interesting because I think he's part of that branch of French so-called philosophers that are sort of poking at life, and probably part of that period that we spoke about last time, which was postmodernism to some extent, realizing that there's so many meanings and yet none. Probably there was a cultural malaise in the 50s as well. Capitalism versus communism was playing out somewhere at the fringes of Europe, and yeah, I think that's probably the context, right? Where they came up with this stuff. I know there's a guy called Choran, Emile Choran, who's a French philosopher of Romanian origin.
Hmm.
That was introduced to me when I was in high school, and it was introduced with the tagline from our professor that "Be careful when you read it. This guy is is advertising suicide as the only option.
Yeah,
Yet here he is. He's been writing dozens of books himself. He's never once actually done it himself. But
he
he's,
was too much of a coward.
which we'll probably get to that in towards soon enough, about philosophy, and how it hits when the rubber hits the road with actual real life, and some of the recommendations these guys portray, and how feasible, how grounded
Yeah.
they really are. But really curious about it, because I don't remember anything about Camus, so really keen to hear from you.
So I read Camus as well as a teenager in high school, and I actually think that it is a type of book, a type of author that maybe adults should read. I don't really think it's ideal for kids in high school because it's way too depressing. Which brings me back to what you said about getting to introduce to another French philosopher in high school who was very suicide driven. To give a
Yeah.
bit of credit to Albert Camus, he died very young. He died at 46. And I don't know how true this is. I just read it about a few hours ago that apparently, as a child or as a young adult, he worked in a car factory and he just hated cars. He just couldn't stand cars, and he said, cars are absolutely terrible, and the stupidest thing would be to die in a car crash. Can you guess how he died?
I'm guessing it was not a tram crash.
No, it was a car crash. At least that's what the urban legend says. I have to double check it, but if this is true, then it's ironic. But he died very young.
Yeah, maybe there's a saying, I don't know how it goes in English, but what you're afraid of, you'll never be able to escape what you're really afraid of. It's kind of
He faced his fears and lost. Anyway, so just going into the book itself, he wrote several books. One of them is called The Plague, which is not what I will talk about, but I'm going to bring it up because it's the plague itself has a COVID-related context. It's about a plague
yeah. I'm actually
hitting a
surprised
city.
people are not talking more about that, because like it's kind of the archetypal viral pandemic writing, right? To some extent, although
Yeah,
kind of
apparently it's
niche.
really good. I actually saw like Joe Rogan talking about it with Lex Friedman. I never know what that guy's name is. He's very interesting. And yeah, Plague is quite interesting. I haven't had a chance to read it yet. I just saw the synopsis, but I think I might give it a shot. The one book that I want to talk about that was Albert Camus' first breakthrough, it's called The Stranger, Le Stranger, as the French say. Well, they probably didn't say it that way because my French is really bad.
L'étranger.
L'étranger. And interestingly, the English, specifically the British, have published it as The Outsider, while the Americans kept the Stranger title, which,
Mhm.
it's very interesting. The story itself is not very interesting, but it kind of like gives the seeds of what Camus believed. The main character is this guy called Marceau, whose name, for the love of God, I wouldn't be able to write down. So Marceau himself is very much this like dude who lives in I think he lives in Morocco or Algeria. Camus himself was Algerian, right? So he's probably in that environment, and he's just kind of like hangs out. And there's this whole love affair going on. That's not very interesting. But at one point, let me actually step back. So the book starts off with Marceau claiming or actually announcing that his mother died yesterday,
Ah,
followed
yes.
by the sentence, or maybe the day before, I don't know. So it kind of sets the tone that he just doesn't give a shit. For me, a lot of it kind of comes across he's like nihilistic. The term nihilism doesn't appear in the book, but many critics actually tie it back to another idea, which I'm trying to look up here, is called anomie. You're probably more familiar with it with the French knowledge.
Anemia, you mean anemia almost? Is that what I mean?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Anomie in the French describe it as the sense of detachment from society's morals, and so it kind of reminds me of that whole nihilism, psychopathy line. However, a lot of the anomie is a lot like just not feeling it. That's kind of like the best way I could describe it. I just don't feel it, and in the book, Marceau starts off with kind of getting getting some ass initially, and he's kind of like hanging out with chicks and stuff. But at that one point, that I don't want to reveal too much of the spoilers, but he shots a man, and the way he shots the man is by having this gun in his hand and thinking, does it really matter if I shoot this guy or if I keep him alive? I wonder how does it feel to shoot a man, and he just shoots him. He has no enormous animosity against this guy. He doesn't. He has no reasons for it. He just shoots him. Unlike you would see with a psychopath or a serial killer who is like, has a purpose, has some sort of inner
Mm.
feeling. This
So
guy is just like meh.
can I,
I
if I
don't.
if
I
I
don't.
do kind of a stop frame here, I can
Hmm?
parallel it to Crime and Punishment because it's kind of built in a different way. It's almost antithetic, right? Because he starts
Yeah.
off with a very, very poor student,
Yeah.
right? And his mom doesn't have any money to support him. His sister is prostituting herself to give him
Yeah.
money to stay in university and law school. Hates the landlady. I think this old lady who
Yeah.
is a pawnbroker, lends money to the whole neighborhood. Terrible person. Thinks that if I can just kill her, everyone will be better off, right?
Hmm.
But he's genuinely motivated to do it. He's been plotting it. He thinks
Yeah.
about it for a really long time. You're saying this person is actually completely detached, anemic, which biologically means you don't have any sufficient red cells or iron in your body. You're basically, kind of wilted and kind of tired and completely careless to some extent. You don't care about anything, which is
I don't.
borderline
I don't.
nihilistic. No?
I don't think they're related to any biological issue. Anomie comes up as a sociological term. Could be related to what you just said. Um, but yeah, what you said actually is interesting because they did
Yeah.
relate this character to Crime and Punishment in a
Oh,
way because it has that whole crime and punishment side of things. So obviously our main character here gets into trouble as well, and he just doesn't show any remorse. He just doesn't give a shit. So the main
right.
story is
So
really
I'm just
just
checking
him.
anomie now. The etymology, it's from Greek into French in the 1930s. Anomos means lawless.
Yeah,
So
I guess
lacks
I
the
guess
usual
so.
social or ethical standards in an individual or a group.
Yeah, and the author himself, Albert Camus, once described the story as Marceau refusing to play along society's rules. Therefore, society fears him, which I don't know if it's true. Like, I don't think it. Like, I guess author says it, so whatever. But I'm also feeling like that's not the reason society hated you. The reason society hated you because you shot a man. it's kind of
It's pretty
it's a
obvious.
pretty
Yeah.
pretty straightforward A to B to C situation there. And one of the last lines in the book is him basically fantasizing and hoping that the people that will watch his execution, because he was sentenced to death, will have a lot of hatred towards him. So it's a bit of a weird situation here where this guy doesn't care, he doesn't show any remorse, people around him don't have any impact on him. He has
Mhm.
zero impact on people as well, so it doesn't really go anywhere in the book. And as a reading this as a teenager was just absolutely horrible.
Is that the last time you read it? By the way, I was going to ask at the beginning.
Yeah, yeah, I read it as a teenager.
How do
Like
you
I
how
was
do you
26
interpret
or
this
27.
end with the fact that he doesn't care about anything, yet at the end he does care about something, in that about he cares about other people's hatred for him and resentment.
I I mean, I wouldn't go there, but I think for me, because in the last scene, he's actually talking with it. chaplain meaning like a prison priest, right? Who was giving him his last rites or whatever it's called, whatever you get before your execution. And because how unremorseful he is and how he just doesn't care what God and other people will think of him, I always seen it as like almost like an anti-theist statement, not necessarily atheist, like he wasn't really following logic in a sense, but he was just really against that sense of religion and social structure. I do think that in this context, in the book, the chaplain and that religion was symbolic to the wider societal structure. So, in the end of the day, maybe it wasn't about religion, maybe it was just about social order, right? So, it's open for interpretation.
Or values, or value
Or
hierarchy of
value.
some sort,
Correct, correct. So,
distinguishing
all
between
that.
good and evil, effectively, that those things exist, and that there's an ultimate good and an ultimate evil, if you want to think about a hierarchic approach to that.
Yeah, I think this guy just lacks axioms, so he doesn't really think of good or evil. For him, everything is the same thing. You know, eating a burger and killing someone feels the same, right? Having just having a drink and running over some crowds is the same thing, right? And that it is not. He doesn't really have hatred in his heart. He's not specifically hating anyone. He doesn't think more of himself or less of others. He just doesn't care.
But I still,
So yeah.
I don't know. I obviously haven't read the book, so again, whatever I say should be taken with a grain of salt. But what the end, I think, speaks a lot to maybe the hidden motivations of the character. I think
Mm,
ultimately, even though it's not specified, and he's just cool, he's just a cool guy that can do whatever he wants. I think that last episode reveals some hidden motivation there, that hoping to be resented, and then that triggers a form of meaning for this person, kind of
yeah,
aligns with the overall nihilism that he's displaying. Let's be honest, it's not like he's not nihilistic. Clearly he's nihilistic. He's not just lawless. He's doesn't believe in anything, and in a way he is the opposite of and I forgot the name of the character in Crime and Punishment, but Raskolnikov, I think, um, which has a different arc. That guy spends an entire book trying to evade the police, freaks out ultimately, and then reveals himself to the detective and gets sent to some prison camp in Siberia, only to
hmm
finally repent. And yeah, I think he basically has kind of a Christian journey in a way, because he goes into um, exploring kind of the relationship that he had with one of the people that he met. I think it was also potentially a prostitute. I don't
yeah,
remember, and trying to explore the idea of being forgiven for what he's done, and he maybe even worthy of love, which is kind
yeah.
of exactly the opposite of being worthy of hate that you're talking about right now.
Well, sort of. I guess Marceau never had to hide from the authorities, so he just told everyone he killed the guy.
How was he
So
caught, or did he just turn himself in?
I don't think they detail it in the book. As far as I remember, he just finds himself in prison. It's unclear. It doesn't really matter, I think, in the context of the book. And I think I think it's interesting the way you phrase it, that when you are opposing all these other things around you, when you are against society, then you're really picking up a value there, right? Because you cannot have value in a vacuum, right? If you, well, most cases. So when you're like, oh, my society is standing for, you know, religion, or is standing for authority, or standing for hard work, or whatever. If I'm a guy that opposes this and says I'm against all that, then all you're doing is you are picking up values that are opposed to that, right? It's almost like Marceau wanted to oppose society so much that he became that lawlessness. He became that, human life doesn't matter.
Mhm.
It's has
I
worth.
think
It's worthless.
you almost said at the, in the extreme. It's not like he doesn't believe in God. He just wants to work against that, right? There's a certain element of, well, I guess, malefic,
Wants
right?
to piss people off. He's the first archetype of troll. He wants to piss people off, and I guess that's a value as well. That's his life goal. And in the book, his life comes to a very short end, but successful achieving that goal.
Goals achieved.
Goal is
Which,
achieved.
which, if there was a goal and there was a purpose and a meaning, and he has achieved it, he would be successful, and that admits that there was a plan to it all, right? It was a plan to feel something. In this case, implied going to the extreme,
I
and
don't know if I would call it a plan, simply because it's not really revealed until the end of the book. And from what I remember, it's not even clear if he just came up with the idea out of the blue that he wants people to hate him, or he actually like collected his thought and said, "Yes, this is why I did it."
I mean,
And to type, oh, go ahead.
no, I mean, I know what you're saying. It's not obvious, but then you got to give Camus some credit here. He probably tried to turn this character into an arc,
Sure.
and have some resolution to the conflict that he was experiencing, and the answer to his struggle was this, which is the ending that you described. So I
Hmm.
wouldn't say it was completely random the way it was written. Even though
Oh,
postmodernism is open to a lot of interpretation, it sounds like this structure and this plot arc was intentional.
yeah, I'm pretty sure it was. Yeah, I think another topic it worth talking about is Camus' wide-ranging philosophy about life. He wrote another book, or it might have been an essay, I can't recall exactly, about the Sisyphean struggle. I
Yeah,
don't know what's the right word for it, but Sisyphus guy
Sisyphus. Gotta know
rolling the
Sisyphus.
boulder up, comes back from the hill in the evening, so he has to keep rolling the shit back.
Wasn't it Atlas or Sisyphus, or is it the same person?
Not the same thing. Atlas was the guy that was holding
Ah,
the
yes.
world on his shoulders. That's why they called the mountain range Atlas, because it was seen as, you know, the baseline for everything. Sisyphus was just the guy that was punished to push the boulder up, and then in the evening it went back down. So he was just like he had a corporate job basically.
It's like,
So
what's the point? It's gonna come down
what's
tomorrow. Why am I doing? So why was
yeah,
Sisyphus still doing this? Do you remember?
I think it was a punishment.
What
It
did
was just a
Sisyphus do
punishment.
wrong?
I don't remember.
Sisyphus is a figure from Greek mythology who, as a king of Corinth, became infamous for his general trickery and twice cheating death. He ultimately got the comeuppance when Zeus dealt him an eternal punishment of forever rolling a boulder up a hill in the depths of Hades.
Hmm.
He was
Yeah,
a he was
so
a
it
trickster.
sounds like a corporate job. So, and what I want to say is, so what Camus believed, or the way he described his beliefs, is that human life is like being Sisyphus. You're rolling up stuff on the hill, and then in the end, you just got to start again. Or you're your whoever your son, your daughter, your relatives will start again. Whoever follows you, right?
Hmm.
So the only thing you can do is while you're rolling that boulder up the hill is just to enjoy your time.
So he was advocating for hedonism, effectively,
I
through
don't
that
think he
process.
was. I think he was advocating accepting struggles and suffering,
Why could you?
which
Yeah.
is contradictory to his life because he was just going after, he was going really hard. He was a play hard guy.
Like
But
in the 50s, yeah. But I guess I agree with the okay, life's a struggle. I think that's true. Is life a repetitive struggle to the sense that, yeah, you going constantly through the same struggle over and over again?
yeah,
Not Exactly. I guess that's where free will comes into play to some extent. And I would tie this more with kind of individuation, Jungian individuation, is things tend to occur to you over and over again, and you find them difficult until you actually realize what the problem is. You solve them, and you progress somehow in your individuation, in your personal development.
What
Until
is Jungian individuation again?
oh, it's just the process of self-discovery. So basically, kind of it's tied to the meaning of life is that I guess the meaning of life to some extent is a set of choices that you have to make that take you closer and closer to your true self, not your ego, but your true potential. It's the self as your fullest potential. So until you actually make the right choices in your life at every step of the way, you will be faced with a kind of a return, constant return to the same problems. That's kind of why I guess the idea, at least, is that we always feel like we're running into the same problems. Or if someone doesn't have any money, it was like, oh, I'm always broke and I never have any
Hmm.
money. These patterns that we perceive as being repetitive and continuous are to some extent also due to the choices that we make and who we are at specific points in time. And where I disagree with the Sisyphus bit is that, well, that appears to be the case in a short-term basis. You can unlock the Sisyphus and move forward. Now, you will be faced with multiple Sisyphus episodes as you do this until you kind of are able to unlock specific moments in life. That's just how I feel. I like that idea. At least it gives me some
Crack the
hope.
boulder.
Yeah, I hope that at least you're going up a different hill from time to time. You get a
Hmm.
different perspective, a different view, hopefully higher.
Ideally, a smaller hill, so it's easier to go up. And I guess that makes perfect sense. Yeah, I'm thinking with Camus as well is that he when he talks about struggle, he talks about external struggle. So with even with the stranger, the struggle or the suffering was this person death, which I think the main character was very detached from it. It almost kind of happened outside of him, although technically speaking, he was the one who pulled the trigger. And to give you a better or a bit more pronounced example is the plague. Going back to that again, look, we are reviewing two books at the same time. Is that in the plague? Long story short, there's a city. It has the plague, and the main character is a doctor who is trying to save the day, and he's failing. And ultimately, all he does is he just accepts that some people will die.
Kind of like COVID. But again, if it has the same axioms, which nothing matters, there's no point. We're all going to die anyway. In a way, I think what he's trying to display here in a very intellectualized way, not in practice, you probably wouldn't do what they're doing, but it's kind of a free will around. I can choose other people's lives when I end it or not. I can choose my own because I choose to die earlier as a result of punishment. So at least that's a free will against the absurdity of death. So I think that's where he's taking a lot of pleasure from, I would speculate. And then also, there's an element of so if life is kind of absurd like that, it's kind of an escapism to some extent from it. I think that's what I feel about it. Yeah,
I,
I had
I
another
don't
point.
I don't necessarily see this as escapism. Escapism would be something um, like Pan's Labyrinth, the movie. If you ever watched it, the girl was in the midst of a war and everyone was suffering around her. Imagine this world where she was the princess. That was escapism because for her that was the world that existed, and the movie itself was about how the suffering in the war actually I guess enters into her fantasy world and how it changes around. So
Wait, I have seen the movie, which is absolutely
yeah,
amazing. Yeah,
yeah, but that's kind of like the point there, right? That would be an escapism. In Camus, he's not really escapist in that sense. It's just he might think of himself as being above society, or I guess outsider to society, right? Which makes you not necessarily above, but just kind of like tangentially related, and that might make you act ways that people think is irrational. So you're outside that society and you don't care about the rules, you don't care about human life, you don't care about, what happens. So your actions won't be influenced by any of those. Unlike for us, who are part of society, and for us it's like, I work every day because I want to earn money so I can buy a house, so I can settle down, okay, I have kids and family, and so on and so on. For him that's not doesn't matter, so for him he does stuff that wouldn't make sense for us, right? So in a way you would say, yeah, he's above that, so he
Well,
doesn't share those struggles.
it's an intellectual exercise to some extent, but I struggle to see it any yeah grounded at all. Right? It's very easy to fantasize. Oh, I'm just gonna kill everyone and just get executed. Life sucks. you know, that's something that you can easily imagine and then play
Yeah,
it
that's
out.
what he did.
Exactly, and it's nice to. It's very it's there's value in living that fantasy, but when you actually deal with life and its pragmatism, you realize that doesn't. If everybody were doing that, it wouldn't really work out very well, right?
Maybe.
Um, but I was
Maybe.
going to ask maybe as a way to close or close this the topic around the l'étranger. I was curious why you personally chose this. What out of all the books that we could be talking about, and you said that you didn't like it when you were a
Why do you
teenager.
punish me with this? Tell
Why
me.
why this book? What's even if it's kind of like you're trying to figure out something. What are you trying to figure out about this?
I picked it because we talked about it last week.
Ah, easy.
There you go. Otherwise, I think it has value in it, and I think even if it's not The Stranger, I would probably recommend reading The Plague, which I want to read. It might be, I don't know, is it maybe Creative Commons? Is it maybe public domain? Is it The
Otherwise,
Plague?
probably get it cheaply on the
Public.
Penguin or some
Yeah,
other publishing
yeah,
house.
yeah, that would be pretty cool. And I found Camus' life to be pretty interesting. And it is no chance to can be
I was under the
sorry
impression that
to
Sartre really hated him, that he thought he was a bit of a paysan or
what is
something
a
like that,
paysan?
like a bit of a peasant in his eyes, who Sartre being a Parisian, right? And Camus being from Algeria. They can stand each other, which is kind of reflective of the typical intellectual French intellectual resentment vibe that were occurring at the time.
I also wonder. I never been to Algeria, but I imagine it's much warmer than some of the other European countries. And I feel like if you live in Algeria, you would just kind of like have the time of your life, no? Like you'll be like, hey. I mean, I guess Jesus was there as well, and Jesus was just struggling a lot. But if I'm in Algeria, I'm on the beach, I'll be a surfer dude. I won't think about existential stuff. I'll just think about the girls, which Camus definitely did. And
I'm
but I
gonna
wouldn't think about much of the death and all that.
I'm quoting from the HuffPost. Sartre famously described man as a useless passion. Camus described himself as a man of passion. Sartre felt most of at home in the dark cafes of Paris. Camus
Hmm.
in the blazing sunlight of Algeria of his childhood. In simple terms, Sartre believed that existence precedes essence, Camus that the essence precedes the existence. I have no idea what this means.
That means little to me. Yeah, I think it's interesting, and like, do you think existentialism has as much role in modern thought, modern philosophy?
I don't know. I I have no idea. And I think existentialism kind of transformed, but I think there's some elements of what you've described in this book that are still exist. And I think maybe it was kind of Nietzsche that said this, and I'm not an expert on Nietzsche. Something about people don't have ideas, ideas have people. So these ideas that exist in the l'étranger, they're not new ideas. They're almost memes, or to some extent, right? As some other people have described them, and they just float around in the zeitgeist, and sometimes they emerge. And I'm sure you could write the similar book to Étranger today, and it would be, or The Plague, it would be set right in a hospital somewhere, and I don't know, pick a place, right?
Yeah,
Italy or New York, bodies everywhere. You couldn't do anything about it. So these, you can easily see why that
yeah.
that philosophy would emerge. Is that the truth or the answer? It's a perspective on life.
Yeah.
I don't like it. I think it's nihilistic and dangerous, but I see why
It
people
is.
would think like that.
It is very, you know what, that now you say it, I actually thought about it that when I did my research about this whole book, and I read like a chapter out of it preparing for this call, and it really, for some reason, it really reminded me of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas,
Mm.
because it also doesn't make that much sense, but it, for some reason, it has a certain vibe about it. There's a certain, milieu around it that you're
It
like,
touches
oh
a
yeah.
chord that, sometimes late at night you might have thought as well, like, oh, just, or I might have, fuck it, just, yeah. But
I think in many ways it has some, something in common. I mean, they both go on about existentialism, and Fear and Loathing is more about like sudden urgence. What you're going to do 1 second, and then what you're going to do the next second. Well, this is just what you will never do, I guess. Never empathize, never have any remorse, that sort of stuff.
mhm.
Yeah. Anyway, so
Cool.
that's it. That was Albert Camus.
I liked it. I liked the topic, and I'm glad I don't have to read it. I'm afraid to read it, but thanks for. I don't want to be in that mood, but thanks for describing that to me. I thought it was refreshing. Um, we can stop the recording, but I can. I don't.